So what is TaskCentre? That's the purpose of the session this morning. TaskCentre is what we describe as a business process management tool, which is a very grandiose way of describing what is essentially being able to do some automation. Now, what are we trying to automate? Well, pretty much anything that involves taking some information from one place, representing it, adding to it, taking it away, and then presenting it somewhere else, but where you have to do that on a regular, repetitive basis. That is a candidate for automation. And that could be doing something like sending out some kind of email notification when something happens. Maybe it's to inform customers that they've got a payment that's due next week. Or maybe it's a case that we've got some accounts in our CRM system that haven't been touched in 90 days, and we just want to send out a reminder to the associated account managers that they need to get on the phone and find out what's been going on with these people. But alerting is just a small part of what TaskCentre can do. It can also be used to integrate applications. So if we've got Mass 500 and we've got data in there that we need to get into our sales logic system, it could be used for that. So what we're looking at here in my folder called Sales Logic's Demo Tasks, each of these, if you like, is a task. A task is a process or part of a process that is being automated. The idea being is that that task will then run as a result of some event taking place, either within the application itself or to some kind of schedule, or maybe it's an email event, or we're kicking off a whole workflow process. Now in this example, this typically might be a scheduled task. We're going to run this maybe once a week. But for purposes of illustration, I'm actually now going to queue this to run immediately so we can see it in action. Now as I do that, you'll see here under the Active Tasks window that the task is firing up, saying it's preparing to run. Now you can see below that there's a series of steps. And so we've connected to our database, we've collected our untouched accounts, we're sending, formatting some emails and sending those out. And then in a moment that will then disappear. Now TaskCentre, when it executes the task, everything actually takes place in the background. So we don't actually have to have the TaskCentre client, this main sort of client program. Everything's running in the background on your TaskCentre server. So the only time you're really going to be interacting with TaskCentre is when you're perhaps creating, maintaining tasks, or doing some other maintenance within the system, or perhaps troubleshooting when something goes wrong. And this Active Tasks window can in fact be detached, and you can have that sort of separately displayed on your workstation if you're the TaskCentre administrator, and you can just keep your eye on things as during the course of the day, or we can just bring it back and dock it back in there if that's how we prefer to have it. But of course, that task that ran is now gone. How do we know what's happened? Well, there's a couple of ways we can find that out. We can right-click on here and we can look at the event log associated with the task, and we can see the various steps that it executed, the fact that it processed 19 records, and then if there's any errors or warnings, we'll get notified about those. So there's a whole notification process that can be set up in the system as well. But in terms of what this task has actually done, if I jump over to my inbox here and just hit Send Receive to collect my mail, you'll see that we are now receiving a number of emails. Now each of these has been sent to the appropriate account manager from TaskCentre, and you can see here in the right pane, the preview pane, that we've got a nicely formatted list of each of these accounts. So it looks like an email that somebody's carefully crafted and put together for us, but apart from the clue down here that says task, we don't know that this has been automatically generated. So you could be sending out these automated emails to customers, telling them about new products, new services, and those emails can in fact come from an account manager, a real person. So with automated emails, we're not talking about necessarily emails that have just been automatically generated and they look like they've come out of a factory production line, and you can't reply to them because if you do, it simply says this is an unmonitored mailbox. No, TaskCentre doesn't do that. The emails that are generated are real emails coming from real people, so that if customers need to reply, they have got someone they can reply back to. So within this list, Okay, so if I'm an account manager, I've got this list and I can see when they were last touched. I could just review the list. I can go and click one of these links here and click on Mary Masters, and in fact that will take me into SalesLogix and take me straight to the account. That's actually I have to say it's not a TaskCentre feature. That's something that's there in SalesLogix. We're just leveraging it, but it's quite a useful feature to have, and that will work with the LAN clients or the web clients. You just have to format the actual link behind it slightly differently. So in terms of an alert, that's really what we mean. So how do we actually construct that task? Well, I'll double click on it now, and we'll see in the task itself that there's 3 steps in the task. You perhaps saw those when the task actually executed. The query that gets the data, the format step, which then produces the body of the email, if you like, and then the email step itself that actually sends it. And the email is actually sent out via any SMTP connection, so we're not sort of tied to any particular mail platform. Now you'll notice here on the right side, this window here which I've just expanded, this browser window. This is the helper screen, if you like, when you're working inside of TaskCentre. And what this is showing us right now are the various tools, as they're called in TaskCentre, which can then be used to, and by setting various options within each tool, that tool then becomes a step in the task. So over here I've used a query to the database. Now TaskCentre can connect to just about any ODBC or OLADB data source, and using that connection we can then query the database. Now we don't need to know SQL code or complex query language or anything like that. The only prerequisite we do suggest with working with TaskCentre is that you at least know the structure of your data and where it's held and how the table relationships are built. And once you've got that, then you can then pull or select the fields that you want to include in the query, add any criteria that there may be to the selection, and then you can even test the query as you go along, as you're building it, to see what data is coming back. And once you're happy with the data, then you can then move on to the next step. So this is going to expose the raw database. So whether we're connecting, as I am here, to SalesLogix or MAS 500 or MAS 9200 for that matter, or any other application, it doesn't have to be SQL, as long as we can access it through an ODBC connection or an OLADB provider, then we can read that data. So once we've got the results of the query, and TaskCentre provides the ability to connect, as I said, via OLADB. We can also connect using store procedure to return data, and I know that MAS 500 makes pretty extensive use of store procedures, so we could certainly leverage that. But you can also get data from flat files, CSV files, or even XML data if you want to, and then access that. And once the data is returned by one of your query tools here, we can then use one of our format tools to then present that data. Now, in this example, I'm using format as HTML. So I'm taking the results of my query, and over here now, the helper screen is now showing me the properties that are associated with this particular step. And I can see the account, the last history date, the username, etc., being returned by my query, which then allows me to use those fields here when I actually compose the email. Now, when I'm writing to the account manager, there's obviously the equivalent of a merge field that's going to contain the account manager's name. Don't worry about that notation. You don't actually have to type that. All you need to do is to grab the username from the list of fields here under my record source and drag and drop that over there like that, and that actually then will expand out to the to that full string, if you like, which then represents the data when the task runs. Obviously it's then going to populate that with real data. And then we've got a table here sitting in the middle, and the table contains the list of accounts that we saw. So if I click on the Design tab now, just to preview that, remember this is what the table looked like. The table is built again, by dragging and dropping my fields into the grid, and then we can then rename our column headings, change the date format or the data format if we need to. So we get raw date time fields coming back from the SQL database. If we want to display those properly, we can do so by editing the format so that it actually reads quite nicely as a proper date. And then you can even dive into the back and set the fonts and the background colors and the look and feel of the table for all the various regions of the table for the title. And then if you need to, you can also put in subtotaling and grand totals if we're returning numerical data. And then the actual sort of layout of the format step here we can use any HTML template which may have been prepared by your marketing department. So if you need to send something out as a newsletter, then that can be prepared and you can overlay the actual data and personalize it that way. So that's how you can create a nice HTML message, or in fact, if you need to, you can create whole HTML pages which can then be published to a website if necessary. So the format as HTML is just one of the format tools. Other tools that you can use are Word. So if you want to create a Word document that contains the merged data, you can do that using I suppose the equivalent of a mail merge document in Word, which we're actually going to substitute TaskCentre query data for those mail merge fields. And then there's also support for crystal reports. So if you want to automate the production of a report, maybe there's a weekly sales report that needs to go out. And right now you've got somebody who sits there every Friday afternoon going through each salesman, listing all their accounts, running the report, saving it as a PDF file, composing the email to the sales people individually, attaching the file, sending it out, and having to do this each time for 35 regional salespeople. It can be quite laborious. Well, TaskCentre can automate that entire process for you. So what we would do is query the database to return our salespeople, so we get their name and their email address. We can then pass their user ID or salesman code across to the crystal report, which is going to create the sales report for them. We grab the PDF file that's reported and then automatically email that out. That can run totally automatically without anybody touching it regularly. 4 o'clock every Friday afternoon, that whole suite of reports can get sent out, and it'll take maybe 10 minutes to process. All gone out, no one needs to touch it.